Hey y'all, it's Rick here with Uncommon Communion, coming to you with a recording on later Saturday afternoon. Yes, once again, I did not record or write for Saturday morning. I got to bedtime last night, Friday night, and just wasn't feeling it. And was reading a thriller, a really good book, and I just wanted to keep reading. So my apologies if you were looking for that. I did want to jump on today, this afternoon, before I head to my winery job, my Saturday job, to share with you about two saints and one movie that are significant, not just for today, but I think for our times. So let us begin, as we always begin, by recognizing, realizing, celebrating, and affirming that we are always and everywhere in the holy presence of the more and each other. So the reading that I do each day is growing a little more extensive. I've added a few sources that give me a really nice ritual, a nice routine in the morning. From the time I place my feet on the floor to the time that I head out the door or head upstairs here to this desk, if I'm not heading out the door, one after the other, readings that inform each other, readings that nourish my soul and my mind, readings that really help me set a focus and a purpose and a vision for the day. Today I came across two reminders of saints who are celebrated by the church, by the tradition of followers, the tradition of the communion of those who have come before us. The first one is the one that goes further back in history, and actually the one I'm going to talk a little bit less about because I want to focus on the second one, the more recent one. The first one is Martin of Tours. Now, Martin died in 572, so he is one of just the handful of saints that we know of in that Middle Ages, that Dark Ages, pre-Middle Ages, Dark Ages of the church. And he was a monk and he became a bishop, and he was known for his prayer and his contemplation and his service. There's some wonderful stories about him being compassionate to a leper, to a man who had mental illness. There's just some great stories about him. And I want to read to you from the Celtic Book of Days. This is something that I am begun to read again. It's a daily reader. Gives me a bit of a different perspective than the other daily reader, which I'm going to share from here in a moment. The writer of this says, Martin has an honored place in the Celtic calendar for two reasons. First, he pioneered an informal monasticism that, following the Eastern model, combined individual freedom of movement with a framework of common fellowship. The second reason is that Martin did not stay in the towns only. He healed and evangelized even in moors and mountains all over France until he died at the age of 80. And there's a prayer that I'll share, just a little one here. Great God, thank you for Martin, soldier, servant, and soul winner. Inspire us by his example to live lives of discipline and compassion. So again, I think here is a man who is a follower of the way of Christ, who is called to innovate. And I think that is so important in this era in which we find ourselves, and why I do these recordings and these writings with Uncommon Communion. And I've been doing them for a while, y'all. This is my 400th post. Yay. And I need to check the date, but pretty soon, I think sometime next week, I'm going to be coming up on my 1 year of posting. Now, I've already posted more than 365, so I passed that milestone. But coming up on a year, pre-Thanksgiving of last year, pre-Advent, is when I started this. So I am thinking ahead, and I'll talk a little bit more at the end of this video about Advent and the help that I would like from you in letting me know what you would like to see from this space, from this community, into the next church year. Well, let's talk just a little more about Martin, and then we'll pivot to the other saint. So he was an innovator. He went out of the monastery and took that same mindset of prayer and service and community on the road. And then that second piece was he just didn't take it into the cities. He took it into nature. He took it into the hills and the hollers, the highs and the lows, the mountains and the valleys, all those places, because he knew that God's presence is already in those places. And like any true spiritual innovator, someone who is able to see the world through the eyes of the broadest, most possible sense, he recognized that God was already in those places, and his role was to point that out and to grow that and to develop that. So he's our first saint for the day. The second saint is a Jesuit saint, and hearing his story and remembering his story today reminded me of an answer to a question that I've been asked for a long time. And the question is this: what's your favorite movie, right? And I'm old school. The two favorite movies that I have are both ones that I encountered as a teenager. Yes, I worked in a video store, not Blockbuster. It was a family-owned, small business video store. And I got to see a lot of VHSs back in the day. And two films back in my high school days really struck me. The first was Raising Arizona, a great comedy by the Coen brothers. I think it hasn't aged well in some places, but I still think it's a great film. The second one, which I think becomes more and more relevant with each passing year, and it's coming up to 40 years next year, y'all, 1986. I was 16 when it came out. It's The Mission. And today's saint on the calendar, Saint Roque Gonzalez, it's not his life per se that's in the movie The Mission, but the characters in The Mission, especially Father Gabriel, the Jeremy Irons character, are very much inspired by the missionary work that Saint Roque did. And the work was really quite unique for the time period. So Saint Roque lived 1576 to 1628. And The Mission, the movie, is set about 100 years later. So it's kind of Roque was in the early period, and The Mission is set in a later period, like 1750-ish is when it's set. What is different about how the Jesuits colonized in South America, this is Paraguay and Brazil, kind of the rainforest, if you will, part of the continent, was that they built with the native people, with the indigenous people, what were called reducciones, kind of reductions, which is kind of an odd name. But basically, they were self-contained colonies or communities where the native people took many of their customs, many of their traditions, and integrated them with what the Spanish, the Jesuits, were bringing. And it was a very liberating, by all accounts, way of humanizing these indigenous people. Now, of course, we know with colonization and the framework that we have, there's always problems with first contact Europe coming to the New World as it was. But as far as what we see elsewhere in North America, especially, and also elsewhere in South America, what the Jesuits did in these reductions, I'll stick to English, was really quite something, and very radical and very, very humanizing for their time. If you know the movie The Mission, it has incredible visuals. I think an amazing soundtrack by Ennio Morricone. Look it up if you haven't seen it. It's a long film. It's a little tricky to understand some of the dynamics, but I am so moved by it because just the characters, and Robert De Niro is one of the other characters who has a conversion, and just this incredible visual scene of what reconciliation it looks like when one has harmed someone else, right? And I just love the film so much and highly, highly recommend it to you, especially as we are very soon ending this liturgical season, which is after Pentecost or ordinary time. Next week is, or tomorrow, Saturday or Sunday, is the last day of either ordinary time or Sundays after Pentecost, because next Sunday is Christ the King, which is the last Sunday of the liturgical calendar, because the following Sunday, so 2 weeks from tomorrow, is Advent, which is the beginning of the new liturgical year and the first of our holy seasons of preparation. So, before I close with a prayer inspired by St. Roque, I want to ask you this, your thoughts and your feedback. I am about to change the format that I'm doing. I realize that what I have been writing is a lot, as the kids might say, it's pretty extra. And I really want to slim it down for Advent. And I also want to bring in more of my writing, more about faith and spirituality and what it means to be a planetary pilgrim on the way of Christ, and probably less about politics. So I would love your feedback. You can put it in the comments. You can direct message me. I might be reaching out to some of you through direct message here in Substack. But I really would love to know, what do you like about Uncommon Communion? Why do you subscribe? Why do you read or listen to this? What do you find here? And secondly, what would be helpful for you as we begin this next liturgical season? You know, last year, my theme for Advent, was all about preparing, right? Preparing for the T-Rump administration, which would be coming in January. Well, it came, and here we are. And what is it right now in this moment that you need, that you want, that you are seeking, that maybe I can give just a little bit of, perhaps, as you are in this time and place in your spiritual and our collective journeys. So thank you all for watching or listening, whichever it might be. I want to end with this prayer by Pedro Arrupe. He was the very well-known director of the Jesuits, the Father Superior, the Father General, back in the 1960s, I believe. And he says this, and this will be our prayer to conclude. He says, "Grant me, O Lord, to see everything now with new eyes, to discern and test the spirits, that help me read the signs of the times, to relish the things that are yours and to communicate them to others. Give me the clarity of understanding that you gave St. Ignatius." All right, y'all, look for hopefully a writing for tomorrow. It is an interesting gospel. We're nearing the end, like I said, of the season, and the gospel tomorrow liturgically very much reflects that, this idea of ending. So appreciate your spending this time with me. And again, as always, blessing and good. Be bold, be well.